Okay. All right, let's get started. Okay, so the next ratio that we're going to go to, remember, we're in asset management. Okay? How quickly are we going from arrival of inventory to sale of inventory? How quickly are we going from sale of inventory to collection? Okay? Then we're also looking at what we call fixed asset turnover ratio. So now we're looking at, as we're investing in fixed assets like equipment, buildings, land, that sort of thing, how well are we investing in those items and how much are they producing in revenues? Okay? So when we invest in some kind of asset like a new stove or a new building or new land for a new location, we should see an increase in revenue. That means that those assets that we just purchased are actually producing more revenues, which is what we want. So when we're talking about this turnover ratio for fixed assets, we start with net revenues, and remember, net revenues means that's gross sales minus the allowances. Okay? We learned that last semester, and then again, we've got this average fixed assets issue of beginning plus ending divided by 2 to get your denominator. Okay? So, again, measures a company's ability to use fixed assets to effectively earn revenue. So again, for every dollar that we're putting into fixed assets, how many dollars are we getting in revenue? So therefore, a higher ratio is better. Okay? Now, think, before we get to that last sentence, think this through. We should have something like, I would say at least, a fixed asset turnover ratio of at least 5, which would mean for every dollar that we have invested in fixed assets, and that's net fixed assets, then we've got $5 coming in revenues. If we've got a fixed asset turnover ratio of 10, that means for every dollar that we have invested in fixed assets, we have $10 coming in revenues. Okay? Now, the issue is this. We'll get into depreciation methods in a later chapter, but it says the depreciation method chosen and how long the assets have been in use will affect this ratio. So let me give you an example. Okay? The Grove Park Inn in Asheville. Okay? Anybody ever seen it? All right, hang loose. Okay. This is the main part of the Grove Park Inn. Now you can see this is a very historical kind of hotel. The folks, the craftsmen who actually built this hotel were the same craftsmen that had just finished building Biltmore State. Really. So this hotel, the main part of this hotel was built back in like 1910. Okay? Huh? This is in Asheville. Okay? The Grove Park Inn. Fabulous location. Alright? So, now this place is huge now because they've added, a whole wing over here to the right and a whole wing over here to the left, and there's a big spa area and everything back behind it, off the side of the mountain. So this thing, I'll bring up another picture here in a minute, but the view off the back of this place is just overlooks all of Asheville. It's gorgeous. So here's the deal. So my husband and I go to this hotel on, fairly, I would say regularly, maybe once a year, something like that. No, they have some pretty good kids programs and stuff, but it's a great place, okay? But here's the deal. So we've been going here for 25 years, okay? And up until about, I want to say maybe not quite 5 years ago, the Omni bought them out, okay? So up until the point of where they sold, they were privately owned, okay? Been in business for many, many years. Again, this was built in like 1910. And think about what their asset turnover ratio looked like before the sale. This building completely depreciated. No more depreciation to be left here. So all we were calculating for our asset turnover ratio, again, net book value. Okay? So we had a pretty good asset turnover ratio here, right? We've got fully depreciated assets, especially this big building, right? And we've got all this revenue coming in under a low net book value. You see where I'm going here? All right. Now, when the Omni bought them out, guess what happens accounting-wise? The Omni now has to put this asset of this hotel building on its books and has to start depreciating it again. Now, what would have happened to their asset turnover ratio when the Omni bought this place with current room rates? Went way low, right? So what do you think the Omni did? One of the first things the Omni did when they bought the Grove Park Inn? Nope. If their asset turnover ratio was low, how do you get the asset turnover ratio up? You can't change the value of the building. What can you change? Raise the room rates. Pretty substantially, by the way. Like a good 30%. Yeah. So we don't go near as much as we used to. You used to be able to get a pretty good deal here and there and everywhere, but not so much anymore. Okay, not since the Omni bought them. All right. I'm sorry. Oh, there's all kinds of hiking, biking. They've got if you love a spa, they got a pretty good spa. Although I will tell you, it's not my favorite spa. Yeah, and hang on one second. I'll show you a great. All right. So again, because of accounting purposes and everything, they had to start depreciating those big assets all over again. So again, to get a decent fixed asset turnover ratio, they had to up the prices. Okay, getting the idea here? Can you see what's happening? Okay, so again, when we this issue of depreciation methods, the other thing is there are depreciation methods that take a whole lot of depreciation early and then it sort of fades off, and then sometimes there's a depreciation method that it's called straight line, which I think we did a little bit of last semester, where it's just the same amount month after month. And then, there's another depreciation method that we'll look at that sort of works a little bit differently as well, okay? So, again, those previous four ratios are asset management, okay? How well are we collecting? How well are we selling? How well are we investing in our fixed assets to produce revenues, okay? This next group is just two ratios, and now we're down to solvency. Now, understand what solvency is. Solvency just simply means that we have a positive equity, okay? That's it, okay? So, we're going to look at an asset to liability ratio, which sort of gives away what we're going to use there, and then we've got a debt to equity ratio, which kind of gives away what we're going to use there as well, okay? So, again, a business is solvent when assets are simply greater than liabilities or equity. So, again, equity is greater than 0. Okay? So, when we're looking at assets to liability ratio, kind of a giveaway, right? It's total assets over total liabilities. Now, again, remember, since it's total assets, any of those depreciation methods that we choose are going to affect this as well. So it measures a company's total liquidity. Okay? So basically, this is sort of the when the crap hits the fan ratio. So if things completely died, our business closed, could we sell off enough of our assets to actually pay back all of our liabilities and have anything left over for stockholders? Okay? All right. So again, pay off each dollar of liabilities. Therefore, a higher ratio is better. So what this is assessing and what this result is going to give you is how many dollars do we have in assets to every dollar in liabilities. So again, it could give you a ratio of 2, which means we've got $2 in total assets versus every dollar in liabilities. It could give you a $5 in assets versus $1 in liabilities. It could give you 10. Okay? So again, higher in this situation is better. It means we have more assets where, again, the crap hits the fan and we got to get everybody paid. Can we do it? All right. Then we've got a debt to asset ratio. So again, total liabilities, debt over total assets. So now we've flipped the results here, right? This was assets over liabilities. Now it's liabilities over assets. But again, this is going to be a little bit different. This one is basically going to give you the percentage, right? So let's say that it gave you a result of 0.6. Now we're saying that we've got 60 cents in liabilities to every dollar in assets, but it's also telling you that 60% of our assets are being financed using debt. Okay? If it gave you a result of 0.75, that would mean 75% of our assets are being financed using debt. Okay? So in this particular case, the lowest this can go is 0, which is the perfect score, because basically we have no liabilities. Now that might be a little tough because we're buying on credit anyway, but a lower ratio in this particular case is better. Okay? And the highest that this ratio can go is 100%, which would basically mean that for every dollar we have in assets, 100% is financed through liabilities. Okay? That would be very, very bad. Okay? Any questions on that one? All right. Now we're over here on the right hand, completely on the right hand side of the balance sheet. Okay? And now we're taking total liabilities to total equity. So this one is assessing for every dollar that we have in equity, how many dollars do we have in total liabilities? Okay? So it measures whether the creditors or the owners are financing most of the company's assets. Okay? So it gives us an idea of how many dollars we have in liabilities compared to each dollar in equity. So the higher the ratio tells us that the company is using more debt to expand the business. The lower the ratio indicates that we're using more equity to expand the business. Okay? Now remember, equity though, so we've got 3 ways that we can purchase assets, right? We can borrow liabilities, we can issue common stock, equity, or we can earn it. Okay? So when we get more equity, it doesn't necessarily tell us whether we are issuing stock to get it or whether we're earning it. Okay? But it just means that we're using more equity to get access to the assets. Okay? Now, issue. It could predict insolvency and cause banks to charge higher interest rates. So on this one, if this starts to go south, okay, which a higher ratio is bad, okay, so the higher this ratio gets, that means the more debt we're taking on to expand our business. And then the bank, if they saw this ratio on a consistent basis going up and up and up, they're going to start charging us more interest for a loan. Or, not only the bank's charging us more interest, but the stockholders, before they start purchasing stock, may require that we pay more in dividends or something like that as well. Okay. Question. Again, this one's going to give you like a whole number. So again, if it gave you if it gave you a 2, that means there's $2 in liabilities for every dollar in equity. If it gave you 5, it would mean $5 in liabilities to every dollar in equity. Okay. All right. Last one. This is not really a ratio. This is just simply a calculation of what we call working capital. Okay. So we're going to take current assets minus current liabilities, and that should give us a surplus, which means that we would have more in current assets than we do in current liabilities. Now, if we have less in current assets than we do in current liabilities, we'll end up with a deficit. That's very, very, very bad. Okay, that could be an indication that you're not long for the world on your business there. Okay, so in this one, you're going to get a dollar amount. So let's say, for instance, you've got $200,000 in current assets and $150,000 in current liabilities. We would have working capital surplus of $50,000. Okay, so this is going to be in dollars. Okay, and definitely a positive is much better than a negative. Okay, now adequate working capital. Again, realize adequate working capital basically means we've got positive cash flow, right? So 1, helps us take advantage of cash discounts. So remember that 210 net 30, okay? When we had discounts, we can actually take some of those discounts. Other things, we can pay all the interest and debt when it's due or prepay it, okay? And get that paid off faster, okay? 3, good credit rating, which means we get charged less interest than somebody else would whose business is not doing very well. 4, permits the carrying of an adequate inventory to prevent stockouts and lost sales. So remember, if we run out of something, we can't sell it. That means no revenue. Okay? I'm trying to remember. My husband and I went to a restaurant the other day. Oh, it was a barbecue place. By the way, one of my favorite barbecue places. But they were out of this. It was kind of late in the evening, so I'll give them that. And it is a barbecue place, so it's not like they can cook something in 20 minutes. You know, it's been on smoke spit for hours and hours and hours. But they ran out of what he specifically wanted, so he had to shift over to something else. I think they were out of pork, and so he shifted over to beef or something like that. But that's an issue. Okay. Now, most restaurants that may not fly, because if somebody walks in and they're really jonesing for chicken and you're out of chicken, right? They walk out and they go down the street and they find somebody else who's got chicken. Okay? So we got to be careful with the stock outs and lost sales. Another one enables the company to extend credit to customers, okay? And obtain credit for vendors to expand sales growth. Now, keep in mind, again, when we're talking about expanding credit to customers, here's the big thing. Number 1, when we actually start selling on credit, they've done studies of this statistically. They know that customers will spend approximately 5 to 10% more if you allow them to buy on credit. Okay? Now, so if all you had to do was extend credit and your sales jumped 5 to 10%, not such a bad deal, right? Okay. And then again, obtain credit from vendors. So if we can prove that we've got plenty of excess working capital, and we can assure our vendors that we've got plenty to work with, and they're definitely going to get, we're going to get their bills paid, more safety in downturns. So, you know, we don't want to actually, you know, prepaying on loans and making sure that everybody gets paid is a good thing and a great thing. But again, we always have to have this downturn thing in mind. So depending on what your business is, where you're located, whatever it might be, a downturn may be a seasonal thing once a year. I mean, there are places at, say, Hilton Head that during the off season, they just completely close the restaurant and they head out because it's just not profitable enough to keep the restaurant going during the off season. So they only open from probably like mid-March till maybe mid-October kind of thing. Questions? All right. That's it. Y'all want to look at any more pretty pictures? No.